And we are live. Hello. Welcome to the second episode of Titansgrave Diggers. I am one of your hosts, Chris, here with Eric and Shannon. And we've got another episode to talk about today. So let's go ahead and let's get right to it. This was, for me, starting off, you could tell right away, you'd gotten through that initial encounter, that initial session 0 where everybody kind of played, and now, there was finally starting. I used to say the hope was that there finally was going to be some meat on the bones here, I guess, in a certain sense, as the adventure really progressed, and that some plot was going to be developed. So I was really kind of looking forward to this one, just to kind of see from a game standpoint where they were going to go.
Right. I think a lot of times with an adventure, with a campaign, Session 0, Session 1 is pretty easy. And this is actually, if you look at kind of how they filmed or produced this, it was a continuation of Session 1. Obviously, they were all wearing the same clothes. So, it's just they broke I think they broke their first session into 2 different parts. So yeah, this was a continuation of what he established in episode 1, and I think that he also laid the groundwork for some overarching plot lines and even recurring characters. So, and that's very important early on.
Not to put you on the spot and totally cut you off there, Shannon, but speaking of that, what kind of plot did you think was being laid? I mean, where did you see that coming in?
Well, I mean, to skip ahead to like the ending of the actual episode itself, when you're talking about what did he call it? The Hellions?
Yes.
Where did the Hellions come from? He mentions, they haven't been seen since the Chaos Wars, and now they're back. Well, what's brought them back? Well, he established very early on that there's this underlying darkness that's coming back into power, and things are just not quite right. And this is their first taste of that. First adventure really didn't have it. It was a basic save. It was
that was
basic.
My phone. Sorry.
It was a basic save the caravan guard job. Pretty standard stuff. Right, save the beer. Right, exactly. So, but this was the first time they encountered something that wasn't very standard, and these creatures, they had no real frame of reference. That's why they were having problems fighting them, because they didn't understand them, which is brilliant, by the way. I love the way that he did that, because so many times when you're playing or running a game and the players are experienced with the monsters, it's like, okay, well, I know exactly what I need to do to that jelly, don't do this to that thing because it'll cause this.
Don't look that basilisk in the eyes.
Right, exactly, exactly. So this was it was well done the way he did that. But to get back to my point, he's laying that groundwork. The creatures that they fought weren't that tough. The boss monster wasn't really that tough at all. But he's laying that groundwork. Now he could have these Hellion primes. Next time they run into him, maybe there's 2 of them, or something like that, where this one was drunk, so it wasn't quite as tough, but maybe they'll be overconfident the next time they encounter them. So that kind of groundwork, that laying down that overarching plot, where did these things come from? And I think that's what he's going for.
Shannon, any thoughts about just overall about the episode before we get into just ripping it apart scene by scene?
Yeah, I was just gonna say earlier about how I really like how it kind of sticks to that traditional, there's that role-play encounter, and then there's that combat encounter, and it kind of goes back and forth between the 2. I think that was my only notes on like the general.
It did have, it's funny, one of the feelings I kind of got as I watched the episode, and first of all, I guess, the length of it I was very happy with, as when you're trying to digest actual plays, if you get anywhere beyond an hour, it becomes a bit cumbersome at times. And this one, was clocking in at about 45 minutes, which was it was very doable. It was easy to watch, easy to listen to, and it almost kind of had more of just a regular show feel. It had a little bit of that just kind of going on there. That was just kind of the vibe that I was picking up as I was watching it.
Yeah, I think that the length is good. That whenever you're talking about theater of the mind stuff, even though they do have the graphics and the sound effects and things like that, that always helps. But I actually watched the episode in its entirety, and then because I was traveling today, I actually just listened to it rather than watched it. I listened to it, and thinking that if you take away the video, is it still as good of a story? Is it still as well put together and understandable? And it is. It transcends that. So that was a very good sign for me, because I wanted to be able to judge it not just on the bells and whistles, but just on the actual play itself. And a lot of times when you're dealing, like you said, dealing with actual plays of role-playing games, yeah, anything over 60 minutes, your audience is either really hardcore and just wants to stick it through, or that's a lot of a time commitment to do for one thing just like that. So, and especially if you're going to do like any kind of binge watching, which a lot of people do, if you're going to watch 10 episodes, that's a long time if they're going to stretch over an hour.
Yeah.
Speaking of the artwork, I freaking love the artwork. I think I said this last week, but it's just so gorgeous. I want my next game that I run or play in, I just want someone to draw it all and make it as pretty as that one is.
Right.
It does add a lot. I mean, from the visual standpoint, it does add a lot, and it certainly helps make things a bit more immersive, from the user experience. They're not, as the players, they're not picking that up. They're not seeing that. That's all added in post-production. But it does add, from a viewer standpoint, it gets you into the universe a little bit more. And I think, we talked a little bit about this last week, some of the visuals within that universe might be hard to explain, hard to put into words, and I think that the artwork, does a really good job of that. So, all right, so let's kind of go through some of the main scenes, the main plot points of the episode, and let's kind of piecemeal them out a little bit here. So the first real thing they did, they had their negotiations with the beer baron, and the takeaways I had from this was that overall it was pretty good role playing, kind of around the table. They did a good job, and I think there was a lot of really good solid RP back and forth, so they kind of stayed in characters, and Will was feeding them, as a GM, he was feeding them good stuff, and I think what really impressed me the most was that the actress that plays the character Limley, she really started to get into her character in that scene. I mean, she was really just, I think, really diving into and absorbing, what her character might be eventually, and really kind of discovering that, which from a GM standpoint, I absolutely love that. That made me very happy.
I definitely liked, I think it was a little bit later, I think it was at the toll booth scene, but I love when characters will role play their dice rolls, because so many players will just get used to rolling and, all right, I got a 9, did I succeed, versus rolling a 9 and then trying to role play it, whether it's good or bad. So anytime anyone does that, I especially like it.
Yeah, she does seem like she's getting into her character. I mean, they're all kind of getting into their character. That's a lot of what this early stuff is really kind of feeling out the system, feeling out role playing. Because as I have found out since our first episode, not all of these are actors. Not all of the cast are actors, and very few of them have, or not all of them have role played like are big time gamers. So they're really kind of in untested waters, and to see somebody take that initial leap and go, You know, going from like the marginally silly, like the Dr. Lobotomy thing and whatnot, but you know, to really kind of embrace that and jump into it. It is entertaining to see. It'll be very entertaining to see as it progresses, how she develops that character.
Yeah. Oh, no, go ahead. Keep going. That's fine.
Oh no, and I was going to say, when you're talking about the beer baron, I thought it was kind of funny that you know, the beer baron was lamenting his lost guards, but yet really wasn't all that sad. So I was, you know, really what that was a plot device to integrate the PCs into this next job, and also kind of setting up the beer baron. I don't know if he's going to be, he might be a patron. He might be some sort of like just a recurring NPC that they have, or he could end up being like a contact of theirs. At least early on, you know, they're going to be going back to Brewcore was the name of the town they were supposed to go back to, and you know, are they setting this up as a base of operations? Because a lot of times with game masters running something small, you want to have kind of a home base. That way you can develop NPCs around them and start to develop player and NPC connections and emotional connections to NPCs, so you can rip them to shreds later. So, you know, so that it seems to me that Will is doing this purposefully, because you know, getting them in, they love the beer baron because he gives them free beer, 5 gold in a beer, you know, and later on, it's going to be heart-wrenching when they find the dead body of the beer baron laying somewhere. You know what I mean? It's one of those things where they're going to get this emotional attachment to these characters, and then it's a good GM will be able to play on that, whether it's killing him or capturing him or whatever, you know.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think that it probably is some good setup, you know, for that coming down the line. Moving on to the toll booth thing. And here's where I had a couple of issues, I guess, with the way things were handled. You know, we were talking a little bit before the show. You can't. It's difficult to try and say, you know, you're GMing wrong, you know, because I mean, if they're all still having fun, well, then everybody's doing everything correctly. But yet, at the same time, there was a few instances within that whole scene where I thought things probably could have been handled a little bit better, maybe, or could have been, or maybe weren't handled how I would have handled them, I guess might be the way to say it. But in the first example was just the role playing that went along with that dwarf. Now, overall, I think the encounter was handled well enough, but you know, this dwarf was established when they had kind of that little pseudo flashback thing that he was somebody in Lemley's recent past, and so there was a little bit of history there, and so there should have been, before they got into the dice rolls, I kind of felt there should have been more role playing that was going on there. They should have had a chance to go through that very tense interaction between the two of them and getting kind of everybody else, you know, involved in what's going on there. I mean, it was still very humorous how it was kind of handled, where she kind of deferred the toll payment to the beer baron, but there was maybe there was more there. I think that you know, he could have been a bit more angry. The dwarf could have, for example, and could have said a few more things. Maybe been a bit more inflammatory. And I don't know if, you know, Will was concerned as a GM that maybe the combat might ensue, or if something else was going to happen. But I think that scene, the potential of that scene, that portion of it, was not realized, in my opinion. I don't know. What do you guys think? Am I talking out of my ass on this one?
No. I didn't know if Shannon had something to jump in on or not, but that encounter itself, I think that you're right. I think maybe it could have been handled a little bit differently, but I don't know. I mean, it depends on what Will wanted. Did he want this to turn into something where it could be a prolonged encounter, or was this just a little blip to kind of say, hey, here's a little taste of your past, and I'm going to throw little nuggets like that in from now and again. The things that I took away from that encounter, there was 2 classic things that happened in that encounter. Number one, you had your thief doing thief things, and anybody who's played for any length of time, the thief is always going to try and break away from the group and try and steal something. Now, she was trying to steal it for the group and pay the toll, but the other classic thing that happened is something that's used quite frequently in the group that I play with, and that's called pickpocket trash. She found pickpocket trash. And there's great like Dragon magazine articles and things like that where there's just lists of, hundreds or thousands of things just random you pull out of people's pockets, and none of them make any sense. And that's what that felt like. It's like he has a strong box, a locked strong box that contains a dead bird and a piece of tape. And I was like, what? Of course that becomes a focus of a joke later on, but that is classic pickpocket trash. They think that they've got something. It would have been maybe even more comical if they would have just stole the box and then later on opened it up thinking they were going to have some treasure in there, and they open it up and they find nothing. But I think that with that encounter, it could have went, like you said, it could have got to the point where there was a fight. And maybe Will didn't want that, because then that just makes them look like they're beating on some old dwarf, and very likely just going to leave his carcass on the side of the road, So I think that for what it was, I think maybe there could have been a little bit more role play. I think Lemley's player could have interacted a little more, but she seemed like she was a little gun shy at that point.
That's what I was going to say. It could have also been he was sort of reading the room and realized Lemley, because Laura Bailey, she had kind of like eased back and like retreated a little bit, and so it could have been him reading the room and being like, oh, okay, we can't have this intense interaction.
Right.
And that certainly is possible. And I think you raised some good points, Eric. I think that this is just kind of a pass-through encounter to kind of drop the example of here's where I'm going to take advantage of some of the past stuff that we kind of set up beforehand, and here's how this might work a little bit down the road in the game, and here's a pretty harmless example of where we can do that, so you can kind of see how that works. I can get behind that. But you brought up kind of the other thing where I had a little bit of beef with that, and that was with the thief's actions. Now, I do like your whole pickpocket trash. I think that's fantastic as a tactic to do that. There doesn't always have to be money involved. But I think where my issue, I guess if you want to call it that, came with that scene was, here's somebody who is a new player. They're trying out special things that their character can do for the first time. And though everything worked out great with the dead bird and the piece of tape later on, it was very amusing and created a great memory, and that's good. I kind of felt at the time that the reward for that initial new player was showing was kind of not enough. You know what I mean? Because here you're going to go and you're going to try and be thiefy, you're going to try and steal for the very first time, and your reward is essentially nothing.
Right, and it's not like she rolled bad, and that's why. Because both of her rolls, I guess they were sneaking rolls. They weren't necessarily searching rolls, but her rolls were good, so you'd think that the reward would kind of reflect that.
Right, and it'd be real interesting to see how that one little snippet, how much that affects how she plays. Because when you're talking about new players, and we talked about this before, you say yes, you do things, let them do cool stuff, and they're going to continue to try and do more cool stuff. You start throwing dead birds and tape at them, and that might, put a wet blanket over it and go, well, the last time I did this, it was kind of lame, so I'm not going to do that again. And something I just now thought of, though, is that could have been a way that Will's kind of rating that in, because one of the things that can completely derail a campaign is when a player decides to go off on their own and do stuff completely on their own, and everybody else is sitting around twiddling their thumbs. So it could have been one of those things where he was putting a very gentle kibosh on, don't do that, because it's not going to bear you any fruit, and all it's really going to do is cause problems later on down the line.
Yeah, that's a good point in considering the circumstance with which he's working in. This is something that we know is going to be compressed into 10 episodes. So he has, there is in a certain sense, it's like a longer drawn out con event. You've got that that 4-hour block to get through the entire adventure, and in his case, he's got essentially this what amounts to, I guess, about a 10-hour block to get through the entire thing that he wants to cover. And you do need to, at times, as a game master, kind of exercise some control, over what's going on or what the players are trying to do. Under normal circumstances, if this was a straight-up campaign setting and they had all the time in the world to go through this, the outcome might have been very different. But yeah, you raise a very good point about that. One of the things I thought was kind of amusing was, and this is, not necessarily a huge discussion, but Eric, as a fellow GM, and I know, Shannon, you said you've run something a couple of times, so a game and a half, I think you said.
Yeah, a game and a half.
Yeah, but it struck me that Yuri, the guy who plays Slethik or Slethk, or however that is pronounced.
It right.
Yeah, he seemed like he might become that guy. Where he and by that guy I mean the one who kind of pokes some fun at the NPC names the GM has, the Carme, what was it, the Lasada, Carme Asada, or whatever he said. I found it very funny because that's happened to me dozens of times where I thought I had an NPC name that was a good solid name, and then here suddenly is able somebody's able to make it like a dick joke out of it or something.
Right. Yeah, as a game master, I've done that to players' characters' names too, so I know exactly what you're talking about. To the point where I'm just going to call myself this because you're never going to call me anything else.
Yeah, exactly, and that and not to belabor, but it does and I think the reason why I found this amusing was the look on Will's face when they cut back to him after he said that. You could tell that it was that that frustration look, like, damn it, I should have maybe said this name out loud, or you found something to poke some fun at it, that kind of thing, and in that threat of breaking the immersion that you're trying to set up as a GM.
Right. I was gonna say that.
Go ahead.
I was gonna say, there was an example of that in a game that I ran where I was saying the word armored guard, but I was saying
armored guard.
And that's all I got for an hour.
Don't lie to yourself. That's all you got for the rest of that campaign session.
That's why you never met them again.
And of course now I've got that stuck in my head too. So next I know that's what I'll be doing next time I have any armored guards anywhere. So did the guards have any Goosebump books by any chance?
No.
You had mentioned something a little bit earlier, just kind of related to kind of player immersion, and that was one of the things that I actually really did like about the episode. I will admit, straight out, I am not very much of a story stick kind of GM, and the idea of turning something over to my players to say, well, describe this to me, describe that to me, tell me what you find when you look in there for elements that aren't necessarily important but yet are still relevant to the scene. That's been, for me, a difficult thing to do. And that scene where Will had the players do that, it was very story stickish. I liked it.
I think it works really well for what this is, because this isn't just them sitting around and playing. Like, this is something I said in our last episode. This is going to be something that people might show their friends that they want to get, into the hobby. So they'll be like, hey, check this out. And so that also kind of shows them, like, it's not all the GM. You can add stuff, and it's all about creativity and, like, making this thing and going through this, it's all about imagination and having fun, and that's why we do these things.
And I liked the descriptions, and I was able to kind of see, Will's buy-in as a GM as they were describing these things in there, and it kind of made me think, and maybe this wouldn't happen necessarily within the context of the campaign that he's running, but then again, maybe he might end up changing something. That item that they created and the story around the six demon jar, or whatever they called it, which of course was a nice reference to Big Trouble in Little China, but that item that could be something that they end up dealing with down the line, which is a nice way to bring that full circle. And certainly in a regular campaign, I would want to try and take advantage of something like that, just because they bought into it, they made me buy into it, and now let's make it valuable to them in some way, shape, or form.
Right. Or one of the common terms that we use when we play is that'll come back to haunt us.
Yeah.
I have a player that we play with who also refers to that as loading the gun, because you're setting things up for the game master to turn around and shoot you with it. So you have this six demon bag, and it's protected by a force field and whatnot. Next thing you know, six demon bags gone, and now there's going to be some demons released onto the world, and now you're going to have to go fix it because you got drunk last night.
I did like how there was a little bit of player hesitation. Like they just knew naturally. No, why didn't you say a 3-demon jar or whatever?
Right.
So I like that they
That's
had
true. That's true. Let's talk about the practical joke a little bit. And I think too, in a little bit maybe of the character of Lasada. To me that kind of my game dar was kind of raised, I guess, in regards to her. She certainly to me looks like somebody down the line that's going to become a NPC of problem for them, whether it's just being a simple pain in the ass all the time, or if there's or if she's some sort of internal evil agent that's spying on the beer baron for some reason. But what did y'all think of the whole scene in regards to the practical joke? I guess in the context of what did it add to the game that particular session? Did it take away from anything that may have been trying to be established? How did you feel it was played out?
Before we talk about any of that, I want to talk about one thing that he did that's one of my favorite things to do, and that's the con check to see if you're drunk. The very first game I ran was Pathfinder, and they wanted to go to the bar every single in-game night, and so I would have them roll con checks, and sometimes they'd get in a fight, and if they got in a fight, I would make it have consequences. It's like, okay, you're not fighting as well as you would. Roll a percentage dice and see how you did. And so I really like that he added that, so it's not just like, oh yeah, we can drink and no consequence. I mean, I get there weren't really consequences this time. It's just like, oh yeah, you're drunk. But I'd like to see maybe later on it's like, oh well, maybe you shouldn't have gotten drunk.
Right.
That's true. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, that rolling the con check to see if you're drunk is especially going to deal with a lot of alcohol and things like that, which, knowing how Wheaton loves beer, like we've talked about before, there's a good chance that there's going to be beer in every episode. So adding a mechanic like that is a good way of kind of reining in the over drinking and things like that. And like you said, Shannon, adding some consequences to things. I don't know necessarily that he's going to continue to do that. Maybe it was just for this one thing to kind of get the players to kind of play out how they were drunk and be more agreeable to a situation or something like that.
Like the prank. Perfect segue.
Oh, very nice. Yes. Yes. So let's talk about the prank. Let's going back there. I don't know. I don't know. I have mixed feelings about the prank as a whole, and I guess which it seems odd to be picking nits about certain things like that, but on a certain level, I got the humor in it. I thought it was funny. I got the idea of here's something funny we can do as players, and we have it, and it's amusing and it's great. And but yet at the same time, part of me, it just I don't know. It just didn't quite settle well with me. I don't know.
It was
maybe
kind
it
of
was.
sophomoric.
Maybe that's the word I'm looking for. Is it felt just a little bit sophomoric, and I don't want to sit here and like poo-poo people's bad or fun ideas to do things like that, because you should do things like that in a game, but it just I think maybe what was bothering um, is that the context with which it was done in that there was still maybe some serious stuff kind of going on. They were guests in somebody's house, and here they're taping a dead bird to granted an annoying NPC's backside. I don't know. That's
uh, Being the sort of player who would do something like that, I'm like, I thought it was fun. I've spent entire campaigns ignoring the goal and just derailing. As long as I have a partner in crime, that'll happen. And I think it's
Not even with a partner in crime. She'll do it on her own too.
no, I need someone. I need backup.
there's really nothing wrong with that. I mean, because it is a fun thing to do, and it's and it does build. Certainly all the players were getting into it, and it was as a team building exercise, I guess you could say. It certainly accomplished that task, and it also made for a very good subplot, subplot joke kind of thing, a nice little coda, I guess you could say, to the end of that particular, that particular session. I don't know. It just I think the problem here really is me. But
it's not you, maybe it's me. No, I think I don't know. I understand. Shannon, I understand where you're coming from. Could I have done without the prank? Probably. But the players had fun with it. The thing about that character that I don't know what she's supposed to be, some sort of like a house, mother or something. I don't know. The two things that popped through my mind were a couple of old movies. She reminded me of Frau Blucher from Young Frankenstein.
Yes.
And right, and Nurse Ratched from One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. She's this overbearing battle axe that is trying to squash everybody's fun, and so that was it was kind of an outlet maybe to kind of thumb your nose at the the Reverend Mother who's going to smack your knuckles because you're talking in class. That's the kind of a vibe that I got with that. The thing I really, really liked about it was the way Will role-played her telling everybody else they stunk. I thought that was hilarious because, that would totally happen with somebody. It's like, man, you really stink, and it's really them. So I thought that was quite funny.
Go ahead, Shannon.
Sorry.
No,
I was just going to say, I really liked that it was also a way to, okay, Will, you gave me this junk earlier, I'm going to kind of turn it against you, even though it was, he said you get to do a prank, but, a prank can be anything, and they were like, I'm going to take this dead bird and this roll of tape, and I'm going to use it because I have it.
Exactly. It could have been a lot worse. They could have greased the stairs in the house or something for her.
Right.
That would have been, and that would have brought them back to being the murder hoboing psychopaths that they could have when they encountered the dwarf. But they avoided that as well. So.
Right. Exactly.
Speaking of murder hoboing, now let's go into the final scene here where they. We talked a little bit about when they were fighting the Hellions. And you already brought up the fact of how well the monsters were introduced, the cool things about them. I guess the thing that I want to talk about, and and I want your guys' kind of experience in this if you've had this, where Sleth's moment was stolen. He
Oh, I
essentially
felt so bad for him.
yeah, right. I mean, he had gotten these great stunt points. He was ready to go. He had his magic all ready to go, and then they skipped to the next guy to go ahead and shoot him, and then that was it.
Well, yeah, because the guy playing, I don't remember how to say that name, Ankia.
Yeah, Ankika or whatever. Yeah.
Ankia. He was like, well, I held my action. I just got ready, so I'm gonna go now. And it's like, no, he has all this stuff. Like, let him do his stuff. But I'm glad that Will kind of saved it a little bit by saying, oh, you dissipate the smoke and you make sure the beer's safe.
Yeah, you get to clean up the mess. Your magic helped clean up the mess, which is good because yes, the beer is saved. But yeah, the killing of the monster, yeah, he kind of got robbed, which that's a very tricky thing in a game, because clearly he was ready to move into that spotlight, and then somebody jumped in front of him.
Well, and also because he had been rolling so poorly for the entirety of it. Like, that was his first decent roll, and it was an awesome roll, and it would have finished off the boss, and then someone else stepped in.
Right. It's like the old, he basically just ninja'd his kill, and luckily, I'm assuming that this game doesn't work on some of the old, really old RPG rules where the person who gets the killing blow gets the majority of the XP and things like that, because that really turns it into a cutthroat game. I think this was just
horrible.
Yeah, and I think honestly that was just really somebody kind of doing a dick move and kind of stealing that other person's spotlight. Who, then again, who deserves the spotlight? It's hard to say. So maybe. That player will do something a little bit more definitive next time. Maybe the player who snuck in and stole the kill, maybe they'll hold back next time rather than do that and kind of, because the whole table reacted to it. It was like, oh man, you totally just took his kill, and that's not really a nice thing to do. I don't think he intended to do it. It was just like, oh, I've held my action. I've got an interrupt action I can do. So.
And he also said he's like, I'm going to interrupt now because I don't think I'll be able to later, but I think he thought that he'd get to go and then Sleth would get to go as well.
Right.
Yeah, and it is. It's a learning curve kind of thing, as new players, you don't, you suddenly realize what you've done after you've done it, and it makes you much more aware of those things down the line, and and those moments that are there, when they show up, and so certainly for us as viewers of it, there was a lot there to see when that all happened. But it's a completely different experience, on their end, and it is. I think, it becomes this learning experience that we all kind of go through in tabletop games.
Right. When you're talking about that whole combat, though, I like the way that whole combat was structured, and if you look at it objectively, the way Wheaton set that up was actually pretty brilliant, because what you had was you had like a two-part fight. You had the build-up with the minions. So you're fighting these smaller creatures. You think that they are pretty tough, and then after you defeat them, you learn that these creatures are actually the minions of something bigger. But he kept that bigger monster separated from the minions, so you didn't have to fight everything, because these are pretty low-level characters. And so you have the minion fight, where you kind of establish all of that stuff. Then you have a little bit of a respite where there's not a fight. You have something that's very, very common in video games. You have the pre-boss life resource come in and heal you up to max, so you're prepped for the boss fight. And then, of course, opens the door, and then the boss fight happens. That was a very video game moment for this. Which that's not a bad thing. I mean, almost, I would say, a majority of role-playing gamers also play video games, so it's an understood trope doing something like this. And it's also it's kind of a benevolent GM thing to do too, because you're not walking them into their slaughter, opening it up to the boss fight when they have like no hit points and no spells left and all and whatnot.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, no, it was. It was a good setup. It was a good, illustration of how escalating combats can go, and and maybe gives the players a good lesson in some resource management, down the line as that kind of stuff occurs. All right, so we're getting down to the final 5 minutes of the show. So Shannon, you had like a massive page of notes there. What
I
else
did.
haven't we covered here that we
Um,
need to talk about?
Actually, I've been marking stuff off as we go along, so far we've been caught up to my notes. The only thing I had about the last combat was I really liked that for the first combat you didn't see those advanced rules like that they kind of brought out in this second one. They had little handouts, and it's like, okay, I'm gonna do this now, and I liked how they kind of, it's the second combat and it's the first boss, and we're gonna up the game mechanics wise, and it sort of shows how there's sort of a natural evolution in these games. And then one of the other things that I had written, I liked that I really like whenever the show kind of shows that it's not just a bunch of actors playing this game. It's really people playing this game, and there's the old RPG tropes. There's the DM waiting and kind of teasing his character, or teasing his players by saying like, well, what was that? How much damage did you do again? And then the long pause, and then yeah, he's dead. I really liked that, along with the players getting so excited. They beat one boss at this juncture, and they're like, no, we saved the world. Because it's a very, that's very,
Very
RPG
innocent.
to me. Yeah.
Yeah, no, yeah, innocent. That's a good term. I like that. And it's true. It's true. So that's very cool.
See? All my notes are marked off now. Besides the last ones, I wrote down who all the people were and what they do.
Wow, you're like super prepared. So, okay, I guess the big question that we do need to answer though in regards to this episode was 5 gold, reasonable price, cheap. I think they kind of got. I was amused because it seemed to me is Will the kind of GM who likes to keep his players poor and hungry, so that they have more motivation to adventure, or is 5 gold a lot in this world? And that's the thing I realized. I have no frame of reference if 5 gold is a big deal here or not. Although I love the 5 gold in what was it? 5 gold in a party?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's right. I think that I don't know. We've not seen them spend money on anything yet, so it's hard to. I mean, everywhere they go, they end up staying for free, or or whatnot. He never really does any of that minutia bookkeeping, on camera. So it's hard to say, if 5 gold is good, because I mean, it could have been 5 turnips. You just don't know, what the arbitrary cost of things are. But I think that, I don't know, maybe it is kind of, so that way when they do have a big payday, it feels like a big payday.
Yeah, absolutely. That's very true. One thing that you mentioned too, Shannon, I just want to touch on real quick is, the introduction of the mechanics, or the advanced mechanics that they did as well. I agree with you. I think that was a really well handled thing, and I think it helps too on the viewer and the consumer's end, just because some people have familiarity with the game system, some people don't, and likely most people don't. And so as they digest those rules as they come at you, then they're kind of essentially learning the game along with them, which is cool.
Oh, speaking, this has this is a very thin segue. Speaking of the role system, it's kind of interesting. The guy who his character's Sleth Yuri is his name. He is actually a voice actor in Dragon Age, and this system came from the Dragon Age system, so that was kind of interesting to me.
Wow, it's like that's a 6 degrees of Kevin Bacon.
Right.
All right. Well, if you guys don't have anything more, do you?
Nope.
Yeah, there was a couple of things that I did have on my notes that.
Go for it, man.
So the very, very beginning of the episode was a recap, and I think that was very important because this is a serialized story that's being released incrementally every week. So unless you want to watch that whole first episode again, you do a previously on, and then you bullet point the highlights you want to show to help further along this episode. And that's done on a lot of things. Game of Thrones does it. I mean, a lot of shows do that. So that way, you're like, oh yeah, that's right. This happened back then, and that has something to do with what I'm about to see.
Sorry. I was going to say not even shows, but also at a game night. Like, usually the DM or the GM will go over or have their players go over the few times I've run, and whenever I do run, I sit down and I say, all right, what did we do last week? And then I have the players tell me. And it's just good. It kind of gets everyone right back to where they were last week.
Right. The other thing I liked, like I said earlier, he watered down the boss fight, making the boss drunk, and then he really hammered it home. You guys kicked its ass. You guys kicked its ass. Next time they run into one of those, I guarantee you they're not going to kick its ass because they're going to go in overconfident and they're going to think, oh well, we walked all over this last one. So I think that was a little bit of a misdirection that Wheaton used. One of the other things I liked, and I know I'm kind of randomly kind of throwing things out here, but at the end, but the whole the code to the door was exactly what they were saying it was going to be. It really wasn't, but he just did that to kind of stick it to them, because they had such a problem doing it. And the last thing that I did want to point out is that combat healing in this game is very fast, and that's a good thing because that keeps the action going. It took a single major action for her to heal the one character. 2d6 and whatever the bonus was, and that's how much you heal. Bang, and it was quick, it was easy, and not some some elaborate actions you have to do, and you don't have to do a dance around somebody or anything like that. So I think that just the system itself is very clean and fast and easy to learn, and I think that's very important moving forward. Introducing some of these advanced rules, you set the groundwork, and then you start adding these little extra rules, these new advanced rules and things like that, and you showcase some of these things. And I think that's something that is, after watching the first 2 episodes, I think that's something that's going to happen. Every episode's going to kind of showcase a little bit more of some of these advanced rules.
Yeah, I agree. I agree. I think that'll be kind of the way to go, because it's another way in which to keep people coming back. Because if you're not going to learn more about the characters and what they're doing, you're certainly going to learn more about how the game is played. And it from what I have seen so far in these 2 episodes, it's an attractive system for very fast play, and it looks like it could be something that could be a lot of fun. You could have a lot of fun with that, and easily get a pool of friends to play that, use that system, especially if they're unfamiliar with RPGs in general. Which so that's
right.
All right. So I think that's going to wrap it up for episode 2 of the Titansgrave Diggers. Thank you very much, everyone, for joining us, and those of the viewers that we did have that stuck with us the whole time. Thank you very much, and we'll see you next week in the evening in the Ashes.
So I don't get to say deuces this week?
You.
No.
No, that's right. Eric totally put the kibosh on that one. So.
All right.
And I'm not one to argue with the man. So. All right, everybody. Have yourself a great week, and yeah, we'll see you next week.